Welcome back to another Peaceful Solutions certification class, and we are going to continue where we left off last week, and we're going to pick up on page LP5A, Procedure 3, if you have your books. LP5A, Procedure 3. And we're just getting into this chapter on effective parents have self-control. And we know that that's a really big topic because self-control is the foundation to all positive moral character. And we're really stressing this point whenever we're teaching this to our students. So starting on Procedure 3, it says, paraphrase the next two paragraphs on page 37. Draw their attention to the bullet points about self-control. Emphasize that thoughts lead to feelings, which leads to actions, and actions reflect our true character. Ask students, what are some things that could affect our ability to practice self-control? Okay, and then we have some answers listed here like drug abuse, physical or emotional abuse, negative influences such as aggression or violence as seen in real life, TV, movies, and video games. Okay, but also think about some other things like a lack of adequate sleep or poor diet or stress. Okay, in order for us to be better parents and teachers and take care of our families, we have to start by taking care of ourselves. And it's important that you tell these parents that they have to take care of themselves in order to function at their very best to benefit everyone else. And this is all part of having self-respect and self-compassion. In order to know how to respect others, what do you have to do first? You start by learning to respect yourself, having that self-respect. And if you've ever worked with children or had children, you know that they take a lot of energy. So you have to make sure that you're healthy and you get enough sleep and all of these different things so that you can properly take care of them and give them, everything that they need and be the best parent you can to them. So emphasize that one has to remove these habits and influences from his or her life and begin making positive changes. Okay, how many of you have ever tried to create a habit or maybe overcome a bad habit? Yes, it takes lots of work, right? And in our last class, we talked about having that consistency. You have to do it over and over and over again until it becomes a habit. And it takes lots of patience, lots of determination to keep doing it, even though, you will make mistakes along the way. But if you stick with it, it's very worth it in the end. Okay, so this can only be done if we become aware of ourselves and our environment. All right, so looking right over on the next page, page 37, and we're going to start on Procedure 3. So right there you can make a little note, LP5A, starting Procedure 3. It says, although many of us would like to think we have complete control over our thoughts and emotions, life's little frustrations can shed new light on just how much self-control we really have. And, it's easy to think, oh, I can handle that situation. I'll practice self-control, no big deal. But when you're in the heat of the moment, it can be a totally different situation. Just think about if you've had a really long day and you come home and you're tired. Sometimes the smallest little thing is all it takes for you to realize that, you're losing your self-control. So you have to be very mindful. Anyone who is easily frustrated, lashes out verbally and or physically, holds a grudge, seeks revenge, or purposely chooses to do things that are unlawful or inappropriate, needs to develop and consistently practice this positive moral trait until it becomes second nature. Okay, so back to creating and forming those positive habits. We want to make practicing self-control a habit. That, whenever you find yourself in a situation, that you're automatically stopping and thinking about what you're doing before you make a choice. And It takes a lot of work to get to that point, but it's possible. Once we build these habits, then that becomes a part of our reputation, what we are known by other people. And one thing that's very important, and you can encourage your students to do this as well, is have a journal. I believe this was mentioned in the previous class. Have a journal and, write down how you handle situations when something comes up. Write down what you did. What did you say? What were your thoughts? What was your thought process? How did you, what did you do in that situation? And focus on one positive character trait that you're going to work on, because we know that through all of this we're trying to build a positive character. So start with one trait and say, okay, I'm going to work on this, and write down when you see progress, and if you've made mistakes, write those down as well. That way you can go back and look and see how you're doing, how you are improving. And those are the little things that we can do to help us succeed. So in the box here, it says, self-control is about controlling what you think because thoughts lead to feelings. Controlling what you feel because feelings lead to actions. Controlling how you behave because your actions reflect your character and can lead to rewards or consequences. Okay, and I want to reference the self-control book, page 4. Could I have my first slide? Self-control book on page 4, and it covers these same points that we just went over. It's the question of the day, what is self-control? And then there we see self-control is controlling, that is guiding or directing, what you think because thoughts leads to feelings, controlling what you feel because feelings lead to actions, and controlling how you behave because decisions lead to actions which lead to rewards or consequences. It says self-control is the foundation of moral behavior. When you practice self-control, you stop and carefully consider whether your thoughts and feelings will lead to actions that are morally correct and in your best interest. And then right under rewind and review, it says, learning to develop and practice self-control on a consistent basis in all situations is a long-term process. So it's not something that's going to occur overnight. It takes a lot of hard work. And it will occur, after you continue to put it into practice daily. So, continuing on here, as we're going through this, the peaceful solution teaches us how to be aware of our thoughts. And as soon as a thought comes into our minds, we either have the power to act on that thought or redirect it to something that is positive. And if we go on to slide 2, we have this is also in the self-control unit on page 47, the self-control diagram. Okay, and we see that an incident or a trigger leads to thoughts, which then leads to feelings, which then leads to actions, and in the end, rewards or consequences. And it keeps going around like that, like a big circle. And it says, there is never a feeling without a thought. So it starts with our thoughts. It's up to you to determine your thoughts in order to control your feelings and your actions. Okay, so keep that in mind. It all starts with a thought. All right, down to the next paragraph here. It says, developing self-control, the ability to control your thoughts, feelings, and actions, takes focus, commitment, and diligence. Strive to solve problems, conflicts with others, while maintaining self-control, while maintaining self-respect, respect for others, respect for property, and the environment. And does that make you think of anything that we learned in the character unit? On page 8. Want to shout it out? Yes, okay, I hear it. Yes, the 3 basic categories of morality. Okay, which is on the next slide. That's in the character unit on page 8. Okay, so we have behavior and attitude towards all life, human, animal, and plant, behavior and attitude towards possessions and property, and behavior and attitude towards the environment. Those are the 3 basic categories of morality. It says, you must also be aware of your surroundings and interactions with others so that if you find yourself faced with a situation that makes you angry or frustrated, you can still respond politely by maintaining your composure and self-respect. Okay, and I circled that word respond. And remember, in our self-control unit, which will be on the next slide, page 107, we have the RESPOND acronym. And it's really great to encourage your students to put this up on their wall where they can see it. So when they are in a situation, they may not always be where they can see it, but that way, when they do see it, it's going into their minds, and it's a constant reminder of them of how they can handle a situation. Okay, so it says, using the RESPOND acronym to help you remember how to stay in control when someone else is angry. So it doesn't only work when someone else is angry, it can also help you when you are angry. So we have R, remain calm. Remaining calm will help you think rationally and logically. E is for evaluate the situation. Look for ways to reach a compromise and humbly apologize when appropriate. Sometimes you may not be in the wrong, but if you take the humble route and apologize, it can really help the situation. S is stay objective. Try not to take the situation personally. This can be very difficult to do, especially when the other person is pushing some of your anger triggers. And we're going to talk more about the triggers later on in this lesson. Using active listening in this step can help you to diffuse a situation. Even an angry person can tell when someone is trying to listen and understand. Okay, P, practice being polite. You can maintain your self-control by always being aware of your words and the effect they have on others. Words are very, very powerful. What you say and how you say it can either improve or worsen the situation. Okay, so remember, you are in control of how you respond in the situation. Not what the other person does, but what you do. O, overcome the desire to retaliate. You will need to overcome the desire to want to yell or fight back. Remember, you can walk away whenever it is appropriate to do so. And sometimes that's what, you might have to walk away in a situation and calm yourself down and then come back to it. N, negate the negative. An angry, out-of-control person can be very negative. In an emotionally charged situation, it is up to you, the one who is in control, not to get caught up in all the negativity. And lastly, D is determined. Being determined means setting your mind in advance to maintain positive communication, even in situations where someone else has lost control. Okay? So that's a great acronym to keep in mind here. We're going to go back to LP 5B now, and we're going to look at Procedure 4. Procedure 4 says, select main points in the next three paragraphs to discuss on page 38. Have group reflect on how they were taught to deal with their emotions. Ask for a few volunteers to share. Okay, so now you can create a nice discussion with your class, asking them to share some of the ways that they were taught to deal with their emotions. And, we all were taught how to deal with our emotions in a different way. If you think about, a baby, how do they deal with their emotions? They cry, right? Because, that's all they know to do. They aren't able to use their words to express how they're feeling. But as you grow older, you learn that there are other ways that you can handle your emotions. Some people might have been taught to write down how they were feeling. Other people might have been taught to go to a trusted adult, someone they're comfortable with, and talk to them about how they're feeling. And some people might have just held on to those emotions because they were never taught how to properly express themselves, how to deal with their emotions properly, so they just held on to that. Okay, but we're going to learn some of the proper ways to deal with these emotions that we face. All right, so let's turn over to page 38, and at the top you can write LP 5B Procedure 4. And there we have a quote that says, "Always choose to do what is morally right." And the only way that we can do what is morally right is if we are educated in what is morally correct. Okay, so that having that positive character trait of educated is very important. It says the first step in developing self-control and making it a consistent part of our character is to realize that self-control governs all aspects of life. And I underlined and circled that because that's very important. It governs all aspects of life. One of the greatest misconceptions about self-control is that it is only to manage the emotion of anger. Okay, and on the next slide here, again, this is from the Self-Control Unit, Chapter 3, which is entitled Control Your Anger. And in the second paragraph it says, "Anger is a normal emotion that we all experience at times. Children and adults all experience anger for one reason or another. There are as many reasons for people to get angry as there are people. Although all people experience anger, it can be dangerous if uncontrolled. It can affect the way you communicate and interact." And I'm sure we all can think of a time of where, we were in a situation where we were angry. Okay? Continuing on, it says, "Although anger is a powerful emotion that, if not controlled, can turn to rage, other emotions such as jealousy, if uncontrolled, can cause harm to others and, like rage, can lead to consequences." Okay, and on the next slide, in the self-control unit on page 58, we have facts about anger. And the first one is, no one ever makes you angry. You choose to become angry. And there's where we must be accountable for our actions, because it's easy to blame someone else for it and say, well, he made me angry or she made me angry. So really remembering that, no, we choose to become angry. Someone may do something that triggers us to feel that way, but we make the choice to allow ourselves to feel angry in a situation. The second one is, anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is produced by other emotions such as embarrassment, disappointment, hurt, annoyance, and even fear. And the last one says, anger that is uncontrolled can turn to rage. Okay? So back on page 38, it says, the bottom line is, and this is a very important point to underline and highlight in your books, self-control is needed in every situation and with all emotions in order to make positive moral decisions. Okay, so there's the answer right there. It's needed in every situation and with every single emotion. Okay? For example, you are in a situation where you feel overwhelmed and confused. If you are practicing self-control, you can remain calm, evaluate the situation, remember the RESPOND acronym that we just went over, think about an appropriate way of dealing with it, and if needed, seek counsel to get the situation under control. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask someone for help if you don't know how to handle the situation appropriately. If you are not practicing self-control, you could fling your hands up in frustration and declare you give up. Or you could become angry and allow your anger to turn to rage, taking out your frustration on intimate objects or people around you. And that's where it can become very dangerous. Okay, so we want to make sure that our students, these parents, understand that if this is how they choose to handle their anger, then this is the example that they are setting for those around them, those who are watching them, okay? And those children or whoever it may be is taking those things in and learning from that. And that's how they're going to respond whenever they're in a situation where they might feel angry. Keep in mind that the way we handle anger is learned, okay? So once we learn it, then it becomes a habit. But like we talked about, if we have a negative habit, we can always change that with determination. Children who are raised in an environment where they witness others dealing with anger by allowing it to turn to rage, are more likely to handle their anger in the same destructive manner. Okay, so these acts of violence, they're learned, whether it's from parents or from siblings or from someone else or from watching it on television. These are learned behaviors. By controlling your actions when you are angry, you are role modeling proper behavior for your children. Regardless of how angry we become, violent acts are never justified. And if you think about it, if we use violence to try to solve the problem, it's just going to lead to more violence, and it's going to be an endless cycle of more and more violence. So that is not the way to handle a situation appropriately. And this doesn't mean that a child, if you set that right example for them of how to properly handle their anger, it doesn't mean that that child's never going to throw a temper tantrum or they're never going to get upset. Of course, they're still going to do those things, but by you being that positive role model to them, they will see that there is a better way to handle their emotions, that they don't have to act out in frustration or cause harm to others. All right, so let's go back to the lesson plan. And we are on LP 5B, and now we're going to read Procedure 5. Okay, so Procedure 5 says, cover key points from this section, the overall picture, on page 38 to 39. Have class begin reflecting on their own triggers. Discuss things that may seem like a big deal, but aren't really. Okay, for example, the cap is left off the toothpaste, the toilet seat is left up, a spilled drink. Have students share other examples. So those seem like, funny examples, not really a big deal, but like we said, if you're having a rough day, if you are in a situation where you're very frustrated, something like that can easily turn into a big deal. All right, so let's go over to we're back on page 38 and under the heading, the overall picture. It says, when you take an honest look at the situation where you have made an inappropriate or negative decision, you will discover a pattern of behavior and a chronicle of your ability to control yourself or lose your self-control. By taking an overall look at how you handle yourself when the heat is on, you can begin to pinpoint problem areas. And that's why we said earlier that it's great to keep a journal of the choices that you're making, how you're handling situations. That way you can go back and see, where you need to make those improvements. And, like it said here, pinpoint those problem areas. These problem areas are called triggers. Okay, so you want to circle this word triggers right here because now we're going to be given the definition. Triggers are incidents that bring out specific responses from us. Okay, and the next slide here is, we're back in the self-control unit, and the title is Anger Sequence, and it says, whether we realize it or not, there are a series of steps that lead to feeling angry. These steps involve our triggers, thoughts, and feelings. In learning to control your anger, you must be aware of all the steps that lead to anger. And we see the first one on the list there is triggers. Anger starts with an incident that pushes your buttons and triggers our anger. Conflicts, disagreements, insecurities, and disappointments are examples of common triggers. Okay, what are your triggers? So this is a great activity that you could do with these parents that you're teaching. Have them think about what are their triggers, what's something that makes them angry. So when they are in a situation, they can remember, okay, this is something that pushes my buttons. This is something that I know is going to make me upset here. So how am I going to handle it? So you're getting them really to stop and think about what they're going to do before the situation even arises. Okay, and then we have thoughts, which then leads to feelings. When you experience these triggers, you usually respond in the same or similar fashion. Okay, so if we learn what our triggers are, if we recognize them, then we can learn to respond appropriately before the situation arises. If you do not prepare yourself in advance to deal with these triggers calmly and morally, you could lose your self-control and say or do something that causes harm to yourself, others, or property, and set a poor example for your children. And I know we've probably all been in this situation where we weren't stopping and thinking before we made a choice. We just acted out on our anger, and we might have said something that was hurtful to someone else, or that made the situation worse, caused a bigger problem, and you can see the ripple effects from that. Okay, so as a reference, you can put in there the character unit, page 80, which is set your mind in advance. We want to create a plan of action for how we're going to respond before the situation arises. Once you are aware of what your triggers are, you can formulate a plan to handle them without saying or doing anything that could cause regret or embarrassment. Okay, and then we see the little person off to the side and they're saying, "What was I so angry about?" So normally that occurs after the fact. After you're done with the situation, everything is calmed down, then you sometimes look back and you're like, that wasn't a big deal after all. Why did I make such a big fuss over that small little thing? Have you ever noticed that once you have calmed down, what seemed like a big deal is no longer upsetting? So it's very easy to allow small things to make us angry, but we really have to stop and think. Because you are no longer overcome by emotions, you can think calmly and rationally and can now put the situation in perspective. So when we let our emotions get the best of us, then it causes us not to be able to think clearly. And sometimes you have to walk away from the situation, take a deep breath, calm down, whatever you have to do before coming back into that situation so you can handle it in the best way possible. When self-control is part of your character, you will be able to control your emotions to make moral decisions from the onset of a problem rather than in retrospect. Okay, so we won't be looking back and having these regrets on, well, I could have done better. I should have done this. We won't have to do that because we're already stopping and thinking, and we are already responding appropriately. Just think of all the time, energy, and regrets that consistently practicing self-control can save you. And not only that, but when you look back, you feel that satisfaction. You're pleased with yourself. You know that I handled the situation the best I could, and even though the problem may have been really big, I still did what I could in that situation to control myself and handled it appropriately. Okay? So with this ends my portion of the class, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the next teacher.
Sarah did a great job, didn't she? Okay, so we're going to take up, if everyone will jump over to Procedure 6 on LP 5B, and we're going to read Procedure 6 there. And it says, explain that developing self-control and consistently practicing it takes diligence, patience, and a plan. Go over each of the additional steps to developing self-control on page 39. Choose a volunteer to read the section. Take it one step at a time on page 40, and then allow the group to do the activity that follows. Ask volunteers to discuss their plans in class. So let's go ahead and hop over to page 39. And if you want, right there in the middle of the page where it says additional steps to developing self-control, go ahead and write down Procedure 6 right there. And we're going to go ahead and read, and it says, first acknowledge that there are triggers in your life. And in order to do that, you have to have a character trait. If you're going to acknowledge that you've got something going on in your own life, what character trait am I thinking of? Anyone? Well, honesty, yes, that's a great one. Responsibility is a great one because you're taking responsibility. What about being humble? Because if you're going to acknowledge that you've got something going on and something triggers you, you got to take a humble look at yourself, right? So humble, honest, responsible, you could put those there for your class, because remember, you're teaching parents, and these parents do not know a thing about these character traits when they come to your classes. So you have to acknowledge that there are triggers in your life that you have a difficult time dealing with appropriately, okay? These triggers could be taking instructions from someone in authority, and that's a big thing, and it's not just a big thing with young people, but even as people get older, they have situations where they have trouble taking instructions from a boss at work, a supervisor, something like that. And when their children see that, then remember, they imitate that, and that's why we have the problems in the home where they don't listen to their parents. Because remember, what did we cover last week? Who is the parent's first teacher? I mean, the children's first teacher? I just gave you the answer. Who's the children's first teacher? The parents, right? So it says here, or dealing with a disobedient child. Now, remember in the self-control unit on page 75, it talked about appropriate ways to handle our anger. And we could reference that on the side there and teach our students, which are the parents. The self-control book and the parenting manual are two things that you're probably going to want to take to every class. You probably don't want to leave home without your self-control unit as well, okay, when you're teaching this class, because you can go back and forth. And it says here, whatever has the potential to cause you to lose your self-control can be a trigger. And then we learned in the character unit, remember, the intermediate character unit, that there's a thing called dysfunctional families. And when someone loses their self-control, or they just completely lose it, something triggers them, you can have what's called abusive situations. And that's verbal abuse, and it can be physical abuse. And remember, we learned about that in the chapter 2 of the character unit. And remember that word dysfunctional, it means abnormal, impaired in functioning. So it's not a normal thing to have that kind of thing going on in a family. That's not normal, right? So the next bullet point there, it says, prepare yourself for the fact that triggers can cause can surface unexpectedly. In fact, another name for a trigger is a test, and I hear that a lot. In the community where I live, we use the word test, and we always say, and the parents say, this is only a test. It's only a test, and it's going to pass, right? So it says, often the situations that test us can catch us off guard. Those are like stumbling blocks. They kind of pop out from nowhere. You're walking down the road, and who put that rock there? I fell right on my face, right? Well, you're not really falling on your face physically, but you get caught off guard, and sometimes you lash out. How many of you have never lashed out in a situation? Oh, there's no hand. Oh, there's one hand up. Wow. We're going to talk to her after class. She's going to be giving us some private tutoring sessions there. It says, but remember, our triggers or tests, when handled appropriately, help develop moral values. So handle them with self-control. Positive character is developed by consistently choosing to do what is right. And remember, doing what's right doesn't bring harm or hurt to anyone, anything, the environment, nothing, right? When faced with situations. Now, see where it says positive character is developed? Remember in the self-control unit, it says any new skill, on page 46, you can reference this, any new skill, when developed, takes determination, practice, consistency, and responsibility. So that's page 46 of the self-control unit if you wanted to reference that there for your students. Okay, now the next one here is have a plan. Have a plan to handle your triggers appropriately when they arise. You want to remain as calm as possible so that you can think morally and not respond impulsively or emotionally. I know someone that she responds very emotionally, and she knows this about herself. So she always says, I have to stop and I have to kind of take a count. I have to count to like 10, 20, sometimes 150. When she turns blue and passes out, we revive her and she starts counting again. But whatever it takes, you don't want to lash out and do something on emotion, because like that picture says up there, what was I so angry about? How many of you teachers, now remember you're teaching parents, but how many of you as teachers, how many of you teachers are parents? Show of hands in the auditorium. Okay, so quite a few of you. How many of you have ever had that take place where you got so upset about something, and then after you got upset, you thought, why did I get so upset? You almost get a little embarrassed, right? Well, remember the embarrassment, because that's what you're going to want to relay to your students who are parents. And they're going to want to see that you're a human too, that you might make mistakes too. So when you're teaching the peaceful solution, you don't ever want to be like, I'm the perfect parent, I've never made any mistakes. Let them know that this is how you learned. Let them know that this is how you learned how to do it, and that you're still applying it, because that's that humility, and it's easier to learn from somebody that's humble, right? I see all the heads shaking, yes. Okay, so it says, now in the next one it says, have a plan to handle your triggers appropriately when they arise. You want to remain as calm as possible so that you can think morally and not respond impulsively or emotionally. And we learned a lot about impulsive behaviors in the intermediate unit and acting on impulse, and it always ends up in one of those bad scenes. Remember those bad scenes that we learned about? So having a plan and rehearsing it in your mind, and you might want to really emphasize this and underline it, having a plan and rehearsing it in your mind will greatly increase your rate of success. And doesn't everyone want to succeed? I mean, your students are going to want to succeed. They want to be successful parents, right? No one wants to fail. Okay, so we're going to want to really encourage them. So rehearse these things in our mind. The last one down there, it says use the STOP, S-T-O-P acronym, and that's on page 40. We're going to get to that in a second. To help you make moral, responsible decisions that demonstrate your self-control. Demonstrate. That means you're doing something, you're demonstrating it, you're modeling it, right? Demonstrating your self-control. It works great for all ages. And we're continuing procedure 6 on the next page here. And this is the STOP acronym, and remember, we're teaching parents here, so it's really important that, especially if a parent becomes angry or allows themselves to become angry, that they stop. Because we can remember, we just talked about those dysfunctional families and that abuse that takes place in the home sometimes when someone doesn't stop and they just act on that impulse. Something upsets you and you just react. No, we don't want to do that. We want to stop and we want to really think about it. Think about all our options, and then we proceed with a right choice. Remember those right choices. So right here it says, take one step at a time. Now, take one step at a time. Does that remind you of anything that we learned about possibly a quote from the character unit a long time ago? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So you might want to reference that there, because it says take one step at a time. And that quote is on page 125 of the character unit. So that journey, but remember, as with all journeys, preparation is the key. And we learn that on page 80 of the character unit. Set your mind in advance. Oh, page 148 was the journey begins with preparation. And then setting our mind in advance is how we become prepared to take that journey, and that is page 80. Okay, so page 125 is the quote. Page 148, the journey takes preparation, and page 80 is to set your mind in advance so that you can be prepared, okay? Very important. So reading here, it says, when something occurs that triggers an emotional response, remember, triggers, page 38 of this book, page 30 of the self-control intermediate unit. So when something occurs that triggers an emotional response from you, it triggers an emotional response from you, stop. Take a deep breath, hold your breath, and hold your breath for a couple of seconds, if necessary, and slowly exhale. Do this to calm yourself down. You might even walk away from the situation if you're able to. Sometimes you can't, but if you're able to. I wanted to put on the screen here, it's the self-control unit, page 72. Take a deep breath. It says, take a deep breath. Slowly count to 10 or 20, okay? That's the self-control unit, page 72. Take a deep breath, okay? Hold it. Count slowly to 10, 20, 30, a minute, 10, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it takes, and then exhale. Also, the self-control unit, page 37. Can we put that on the screen there? Tips for overcoming stress. Do you remember these? Do you remember these? Laugh at least 10 times a day. Does anyone want to read these? Can you see them on the screen? Anyone want to read those for us? Do we have a microphone person? You want to read a couple of these? Okay, here in the front, she's going to read some, right in the front row. Right over here. The other way. Right there. There you go. The lady right here in the front row. We got a long front row here because we're social distancing. For those of you who are watching online, the front row looks like a football field in here.
Okay, tips for overcoming stress. Laugh at least 10 times a day. Drink more water. Stress dehydrates the body. Maintain a positive attitude. Identify the feelings associated with the stress and dissolve it. Deal with it. Focus on the here and now. Massage the back of your neck. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay. Take some deep breaths in through your nose, letting them out slowly through your mouth. Think of all the things you are thankful for. Count to 10 and think of how someone you respect would handle the situation.
Okay, so I'll be laughing while I'm getting the massage on my neck while I'm holding my breath, okay? Now, those are some great tips, and we need to really use those things and teach these parents to use those things, because there's other things to do besides lash out, okay? So those are the things we have to do. So then we're continuing there. It says, think. Think about the situation you're experiencing. Keep in mind that this is one of your triggers or tests. If you handle it respectfully, it will bring you one step closer to having positive moral character. That's our goal, right? Then consider all of your options and choose an option for handling it appropriately, morally, and harmlessly, and then proceed with that option. Remember to remain calm. Underline that. Remember to remain as calm as possible. Avoid responding impulsively. And a reference for that impulsively is Self-Control, page 41, where it talked about acting on emotions without carefully considering, and that is the definition on the self-control unit, page 41, for impulsively. We don't want to respond impulsively. And that last sentence there, underline that. It says, and to stay in control. Because when we don't act impulsively, we are remaining in control, and that's really important. As a parent, you want to remain in control, right? The next paragraph there, it says, we have to learn to make moral choices from the beginning of a problem. See, we remember those moral principles that we just covered? We have these moral principles. We have to remember those, and then we can make a moral choice, page 17 and page 11. We have to learn to make these moral choices from the beginning of the problem rather than losing self-control. We need to learn to practice insight and, okay, this is important. We need to learn to practice insight and foresight. Now we're going to learn the definitions. Insight is knowing what the heart of the matter is, what you're dealing with. In other words, you're able to look past irrelevant information and focus on what is really important. Foresight is the ability to anticipate the outcome of a situation based on present facts. And a lot of times, as parents, you really know that when your child is getting ready to get into something deep. And because most children now, starting with very young all the way up to the teen years, they're born thinking that they know more than their parents. I don't know, it's like they just come out with this like pre-programmed thing, I know more than you. And you try to tell them, I know more than you. But really, the life experiences that you've had, they don't have those. And you've been through a lot of the things that you can see that they're getting ready to go through. And it's really important that you have a great relationship with your children and that they feel comfortable talking to you. And that's what you really want to get across to your students who are the parents, remember. Because if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, they're going to find an influence, a friend, probably someone a few years older that'll hook them up with a boy, or if it's a boy, hook them up with a girl, go behind your back, sneak out of the house, all these things. That's a negative influence. And if we don't have a positive relationship with our children, they're going to find someone who will talk to them, but they offer them things that you wouldn't want them to be doing. So it's very important, parents. We have to teach the parents how important their job is as the role models. It's vital, or they will find somebody that will spend time with them. And trust me when I say, that kind of time is not what you want your children to be exposed to. Because more times than not, that friend, that little bit older friend that's pulling them away from your family unit, they probably have a broken, dysfunctional home themselves. And so their goal is to have someone to do these things with, because they don't have anyone watching over them. They don't have anyone checking in on them. Most of the time, it's their parents just let them go. I can remember having friends that their parents never cared where they were at. My mom always wanted to know where I was at. And I had to tell her. And I had parents or friends growing up that you want to spend the night? Sure. Do you have to call your mom? No. Like, really? They had like this open, free relationship. And that was back, I'm not a young person, so you're talking back a ways. Back a ways. And it's even worse now. It's a lot worse now. So now we're going to go to set your mind in advance. And that sounds familiar, right? In the chart on page 41, use column 1 to write one of your triggers. In column 2, formulate a behavioral plan on how to handle it. Your goal is to rehearse your behavioral plan so that when the triggers arise, you can deal with them in a harmless, moral, positive way. Rehearse your plan, and it is a plan, and you've got to rehearse it mentally until it becomes second nature. Now, I want to put a slide up because there's an enrichment activity on page 85. I think it's the self-control unit. Is this a self-control? Yeah. Self-control unit. And it's a management plan to help manage our anger and resolve conflicts peacefully. So you can see that we've already, as students of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, we've already learned how to do a lot of these things. So a lot of these things that we teach the children, we're teaching the parents as well. Do you see why? Because we want a whole family that's going to practice self-control. We want the teens to practice it. We want the young children to practice it. We want the parents to practice it. Because then we have a whole family that practices self-control. And remember, self-control is the foundation. All positive, right? All. Okay, and then I wanted to show you something else here because it says rehearse your plan mentally until it becomes second nature. On page 71 of the character unit, do you remember that mirror, mirror? Do you remember way back then? It was called Mirror, Mirror. And I wanted to read a paragraph out of that. On page 71 of the character unit, it says, as babies, you imitated your parents in how to speak, eat, smile. You developed habits that are now second nature to you. So, when you practice and rehearse your self-control plan, it's going to become second nature to you. That means it becomes part of you. Now, in Webster's dictionary, second nature, it says it means an acquired, deeply ingrained habit or skill. And in dictionary.com, it says an acquired habit or tendency in one's character, so deeply ingrained as to appear automatic. So it is ingrained in our character. It becomes second nature. You don't even have to think about it anymore. So you want that plan, that positive plan, you want that to become second nature. You don't have to think about it. You're not going to lose your cool. You're going to always do the right thing. You're going to respond appropriately, right? So you can see the column 1, column 2 here on the next page, on page 41. And remember, this is like a parent version of the hot thoughts, cool thoughts. Do you remember that? And we did that in the self-control unit, page 73. It's kind of like a parental unit, a parental of this. And of course, we've moved into procedure 7, and this activity is optional. You want to flip back there. It says the activity is optional. Have students design a poster or a visual reminder of their commitment to develop and constantly practice self-control. Okay, so now we're going to go to procedure 8 now, and it says emphasize the last paragraph on page 41. Stress that they should not give up, because by working so hard to achieve their goals, the more able they will be to teach it to their children. If they achieve their goals and they learn self-control, then they're going to be able to teach it to their children. And just a heads up, the next chapter, we're going to teach how it's important to be that role model to their children, and so that they can model that behavior of self-control when they're teaching it to them. Because you can't say, darling Susie, you must practice self-control. And then Susie sees mom fighting and going into a big tirade with dad, right? Because children, they learn more from what they see than what you tell them. You can tell them all day long, but it's what they see, those actions in you, okay? So let's jump over to page 41 here. And we're going to read, it says, developing self-control and practicing it diligently in every aspect of your life will not occur overnight. So don't expect that one day, you're going to read this book, and you're going to wake up the next day, and you're automatically going to have self-control. Boy, that would be nice. I would really want to sign up for that course. Yes, but it doesn't work that way. But remember, self-control unit, page 10, it said, developing and practicing self-control will enable you to develop many other positive character traits. Do you remember when we learned that? And we learned some of those positive character traits that developing self-control would allow us to develop. And that's something that we might want to bring into this lesson when we're teaching our parents, because they're going to need those. One of them is patience, because it's not going to take place overnight, right? So put those things in your margin and refer to them when you're teaching your parents, okay? So it says it takes time, effort, energy to learn new ways to handle your emotions, because you've done it the same way your whole life, but you can't do that anymore. You're on a new train, you're on a new track. And then to act in a controlled fashion. Although success might be difficult at first, don't give up. Underline that. Don't give up. If a situation arises where you fail to follow through on your plan, take an objective look at your actions and evaluate your behavior. Evaluate your behavior. Underline that. You really want them to be evaluating their own behavior, because when they do this, they're going to grow. What did you do wrong? That takes humility. What did you do wrong? Parent, remember you're teaching them. They have to evaluate what they did wrong and how it escalated. Have you ever seen, or hopefully not been in a situation with a family member where you said this, they said that, then you said this, and the next thing you know, it escalates, right? Well, that would be, that did not work. I made a boo-boo today. I'm going to try this next time. Because a lot of times in families, have you ever met the last word family? I gotta have is the mom, the last word family. I gotta have the last word. And then the dad is no, I gotta have. So no, I gotta have the last word. And then the children, oh, we're having the last word. So everyone thinks that they have to have the last word, and it just keeps on going. Have you ever experienced that? Anyone that's ever had experience in a family, which most of us all came from a family unless we were hatched from eggs. You've known situations where something's said, and you think it's going to be done, but then somebody else says something else, and it's just like, I said stop. I said stop. Don't make me come in there. Don't make me come in there. I've actually witnessed this. And I'm just like, stop, stop. Sometimes the parent should be the one to stop, because we go back and forth. Sometimes it could be worse than the child. I said stop. I said stop. Don't make me come in there. Don't make me come in there. I'm going to give you one more opportunity. I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 500. And you want to cry for the parent to say, please stop. We have to be teaching the parents that they have to be the bigger person. They are the bigger person. That takes humility and self-control. Okay, so take a look at your actions and evaluate your behavior. What did you do wrong? What did you do wrong? No. Look at your actions and evaluate that. What did you do right? You stopped at 386 this time. Once you've evaluated your actions, determine in advance not to make those same wrong decisions. If a similar situation occurs, rehearse your plan and make a different plan, or make a different plan for the next time you're faced with that trigger. Don't stop trying. Underline and highlight that. Don't stop trying. Until you have achieved your goal, we had a lot on goals in the intermediate unit, of consistently using self-control in every aspect of your life. Now, in the self-control unit, page 46, it says, consistently practice self-control until it becomes a habit. So we want to consistently use self-control in every aspect of our lives, okay? Once you do this, when you're in a situation, you will become the bigger person, the parent will, and that's what we have to teach them, if they can practice that self-control. Because when a parent loses self-control, they automatically lower themselves in the eyes of the child, and the child always knows that they can one-up and go back and banter back and forth with the child, and that should never be. The parent always has to stay in control, and that's what we have to teach them. Remain calm and stay in control. Keep your rank as parent, okay? We finished this chapter. Well, let's do the conclusion. Let's read that conclusion. Procedure 9. Conclude by reminding the class that by controlling their actions when they are angry or going through any other negative feeling or situation, they are role modeling proper moral behavior for their children, okay? So next week we're going to take up same time, same place, and we're going to move on to our next chapter. So thank you once again for coming to our seminar.